Ya, the July dawn came shyly over Loch Lean, a skein of apricot light unravelling across the slate-blue water. Captain Fiona McRae nudged the throttle of the Hebridean Post, the 30-foot mailboat she ran up and down the narrow sea locks of the Western Highlands. The engine hummed a rhythm she now trusted more than heartbeat or heavens. Once, in another life, Fiona had paced the hallways of the Glasgow police headquarters, following bloodstains and alibis instead of tide charts and the gull's white wake. When her husband died 2 winters earlier, she traded interrogations for salt air, thinking that on the water grief might dilute itself. It worked most days, until something reminded her that puzzles never stopped appearing, no matter how far one sailed to escape them. She'd stopped that wake. Today, to get in Oban, the dockside postmaster had hoisted the canvas mailbag aboard with his usual joke. "Love letters and overdue bills, Captain. See if you can tell which is which," before retreating into the bustle. Fiona now had 27 nautical miles and 6 drop-offs to make before the afternoon squall the radio insisted was coming. She cinched her oilskin tighter and sorted envelopes by jetty. Stamped in Inverness, 3 ivory cream envelopes sat together like clone siblings. Each bore the same angular copperplate, the kind people rarely teach themselves now that ballpoints and email exist. To Morag Campbell, Glen Torran. To Lady Elspeth Drummond, Castle Drummond. To Aline Ferguson, Innisport. Fiona frowned. All 3 recipients were women she knew distantly, and all 3 were recent widows. They also lived miles apart and moved in different circles, yet the handwriting, the stationery, even the burgundy sealing wax were identical. Coincidence, she told herself, flipping the envelopes over. Then the detective she had tried to strangle to death inside her own mind leaned forward and whispered, "When coincidences occur 3 at a time, someone has arranged them." She slid the letters into the appropriate pouches and set course northward. 1. Glentoran consisted of 6 crofts, a weather-beaten pier, and sheep who behaved as if they owned copyright on the surrounding silence. Fiona tied up, swung the mailbag ashore and handed it to Morag Campbell, a wiry woman of 60 who smelled faintly of sheep dip and heather honey. "There's one addressed in red wax," Fiona said casually. "Looks a bit grand." Morag accepted it, her wind-reddened cheeks flushing deeper. She lifted her spectacles, read the first line, and inhaled hard. Before Fiona could decide whether to express concern, the old woman tucked the letter into her apron and mumbled thanks. As the Hebridean Post backed away, Fiona saw Morag still standing on the jetty, thumb worrying the broken seal, lips parted as if a word had jammed between them. 2. Castle Drummond, 8 miles farther, rose out of pine woods like a chess piece forgotten by giants. Lady Elspeth Drummond, widowed 3 months, met the boat at her private stone landing. Unlike Morag's practical clothing, Elspeth wore black silk gloves and a mourning brooch that glimmered with jet. She accepted the day's bundle of envelopes, paused at the ivory one, read the first sentences and visibly gripped the rail. "Everything all right, my lady?" Fiona asked, affecting the respectful tone local servitors used. Elspeth managed a cool nod. "Quite. Thank you, Captain." But as Fiona cast off, she glimpsed the aristocrat's shoulders shaking once, violently, before stiffening into marble again. 3. The afternoon sun washed the white cottages of Innisport in pearly light when Fiona delivered the last letter. Aileen Ferguson, no more than 32, hurried down the quay with her 4-year-old son on her hip. Her fisherman husband had died the previous Christmas Eve, when a rogue swell overturned his creel boat. Grief still clung to her like an ill-fitting coat. Aileen opened the letter on the spot, and tears glazed her lashes before she'd reached whatever bit caused them. She pressed the page to her chest, whispered, "Impossible," and hugged her boy as if only his small bones kept her anchored to earth. Fiona stepped aboard again, unsettled. 3 widows, 3 identical envelopes, 3 shocks. She told herself it could still be innocent, until she recalled that the last time she'd seen burgundy sealing wax on love letters, it had been part of a confidence trick that relieved a lonely pensioner of £20,000. That evening, the Hebridean post lay berthed at the Coroneros. Inside the wheelhouse, Fiona spread her logbook and began jotting impressions. Identical paper, identical script, posted in Inverness yesterday, delivered today, emotional impact evident. Glancing up, she caught her reflection in the wheelhouse window. Auburn hair escaping a bun. Green eyes sharpened by curiosity she'd sworn to dull. The promise shriveled. A puzzle had sprung up on her route, and she could no more ignore it than smother a lighthouse beam with her hand. 4. Next morning she started, in reverse order, heading first for Innisport. Courtesy of a steaming mug of tea, she persuaded Eileen to let her reread the letter. It was typed in elegant courier font, on thick laid paper. My dearest, though the world believes me dead to you, I have never ceased loving you. Come to the gorse ridge above Corrybawn at sunset on the 14th. Until then, trust this is no ghost, but a flesh and blood heart returning to its rightful home. Forever yours. Ah. No personal detail, no specific endearments, nothing to anchor the writer to Eileen's lost husband, Lachlan. Yet Eileen, cheeks glowing, insisted the phrases about trust and Gorse Ridge were exactly the sort of nonsense he used to say. Did Lachlan ever sign with just an R? Fiona asked gently. Eileen blinked. No. But he joked he should have been christened Rudrick 'cause he swore like a ruddy-ruddy at sea. She laughed self-consciously. Maybe that's it. Fiona said nothing. She pocketed the smell of peat smoke lingering on the page and the faint impression of a watermark. Glenfast Papers, Aberdeen. A second later she recognized the stanza, faintly embossed under the typelines from Robert Burns's A Fond Kiss. Whoever manufactured the stationery, they catered to the sentimental, or the cunning. At Castle Drummond, Lady Elspeth admitted Fiona to a drawing-room larger than the post office of Oban. When she unfolded her letter, it was word for word identical to Eileen's. No mention of Elspeth's late husband, the distinguished Colonel Forbes Drummond. Still the noble woman clung to hope, like a drowning woman to jetsam. Colonel Drummond's body was never recovered from the avalanche in the Alps, she whispered. Absurd as it sounds, I've prayed for something, an explanation, a sign. Did he ever sign himself R? Elspeth hesitated. His middle name was Robert. At Glentoran, Morag Campbell brewed Fiona a coffee strong enough to revive Lazarus. Her letter, too, matched the others. Morag's husband Rory had perished in last year's salmon farm fire. He'd liked Burns, she said, smoothing the page. He'd have chosen these words. Morag's weathered face glowed the way morning light steals across barley fields. 3 widows, 3 differing circumstances, yet each letter shaped to fit the outline of their longing. A universal pattern disguised as intimate truth. Fiona's mind erected a flowchart. Writer needs widows to believe note is personal. Generic language helps it fit multiple histories. Appointment set for the 14th 4 days hence at Corryban, an isolated hillside reachable by a single farm track. Potential motives: A. Blackmail, B. Theft, A. Misguided romance. She telephoned DCI Graham in Glasgow, an old colleague now more comfortable in suits than field jackets, but his line answered with recorded tones. She left a cryptic message. Might need backup in Argyll on the 14th. Late. Unsure whether hearts or wallets targeted. 5. Fiona investigated the postal angle next. Inverness sorting office confirmed the frank mark. 3:15 p.m. on the 9th. The envelopes had come in a larger manila wrapper, prepaid, which meant the inner letters might have been prepared anywhere. At Corin's only pub she overheard fishermen discussing a Silver Morris traveller seen nosing around the back lanes last week. The driver, a smooth-talking Sassenach in tweeds, had asked directions to Corrybennan and remarked on its romantic wilderness. Roland Ross. The name hit Fiona like a thrown stone skipping across her memory. 7 years earlier, she'd questioned a petty fraudster by that name, accent Knightbridge polished, manner genial, handwriting immaculate. He'd specialized in sentimental bonds. He would research obituaries, charm widows by mail, then borrow money for fictitious ventures. His hallmark? Burgundy wax, bearing an 18th century intaglio of Cupid's bow. Case collapsed when the star witness remarried and refused to testify. Roland walked free. Fiona dug in her cabin trunk for the old notebook she couldn't bring herself to burn. Under Roland Ross, she'd scribbled, gifted mimic, owns portable typewriter, carries Robert Burns' anthology, uses our signature, collects rare paper watermarked Glen Fast. All at once, the Highland air sharpened like the edge of a claymore. Roland hadn't changed methodologies, only scenery. 6, on the morning of the 14th, mist clung to the hills like secrets to a liar. Fiona motored early to each widow, confessing what she could without shattering them. She told them about Ross, about identical letters, and about her suspicion that the rendezvous was a con designed to separate them from valuables. Rings, heirloom brooches, war pensions. Morag stiffened. "Why involve us then, Captain? Let the police net him." "To Billy will," Fiona assured, "but he must be caught in the act, and for that we need bait he can't resist." Aline's slender back straightened like a mast. "We go, we play along, and we end it, for all the women he's tricked already." Lady Elspeth removed her gloves. "I've faced bigger battles. Tell us how." 7. Corrie Balin lay a mile up, a cart track studded with gorse, ablaze in yellow bloom. At 7:30, haze turned the hillside to pearl. Fiona hid the Hebridean post in a narrow inlet, then escorted the 3 widows along a sheep trail to a tumble-down shepherd's shailing overlooking the appointed ridge. DCI Graham and 2 plainclothes constables crouched inside. Their unmarked Mondeo parked beyond a stand of Scots pine where it looked like an abandoned poacher's car. They rehearsed the script. Each widow would approach the gorse ridge separately at 10-minute intervals, wearing an obvious piece of jewellery. They would feign rapture, speak the lines Ross hoped for. At the agreed signal, a tilt of the head in Fiona's direction, the officers would emerge. Aileen went first, nerves taut but resolute. She walked into the clearing, where gorse scented the air like coconut. A figure detached from a rowan tree, tall, fawn tweed jacket, trilby hat. Roland Ross in full romantic regalia. From the shearling's broken window, Fiona heard him murmur, "My darling." Then, smooth as a violin sliding into a new key, "You've brought the locket? The one your dear husband cherished?" Aline's voice ringing clear. "Of course, Roderick." Fiona noted the improvisation. Perhaps Aline needed the comfort of a name to make the charade easier. Roland took her hand, holding it a fraction longer than gallantry demanded. His gaze drifted toward the brooch on Aileen's shawl, a silver knot set with cairngorm stones. He coaxed her to sit on a fallen log where he might explain everything. Morag arrived next, feigning wide-eyed astonishment. Ross turned the charm meter up another notch, switched from English-received pronunciation to a lilting Highland burr, as if to match her. He used the same rehearsed phrases. A love that survived beyond death, the miracle of reunion, precious keepsake. This time his eyes fastened on Morag's gold wedding band. Lady Elspeth approached third, jewels and grief both glinting in the muted sun. Ross kissed her gloved hand with continental flair, addressing her as "my brave love," assuring he had endured 1,000 perils to return. Again the plea, had she brought the family's signet ring for old time's sake? Each widow responded with the cue tilt of the head while stalling him. Back in the sheiling, Fiona mouthed, "Wait." She wanted him caught with incriminating words about money, not merely creepy declarations. The police hunched like pointers ready to flush game birds. Ross began weaving the next thread of his web. "Alas, no bank will recognize me after being declared deceased. We must prepare for our new life abroad. Could you secure something liquid? Jewelry first, perhaps, then a modest sum in cash." Hook said. Fiona signalled. 8. Officer Hamish Kerr burst from the shieling, badge aloft. Fiona followed, alongside Graham and Constable Patel. Ross sprang up, face whitening. A 1-second calculus ran across his eyes. Hillside, cops, 3 betrayed women. He bolted toward the cart track. Graham lunged but slipped on damp moss. Ross cleared a gorse bush that snagged his jacket. Fiona sprinted to intercept. Years on deck had kept her legs strong. She cut down a slope, emerging where the track bent. Ross was 20 paces away when his foot skidded on loose shale. He staggered, arms flailing, and Fiona tackled him, both tumbling into the bracken. Somewhere above, a black grouse erupted, scolding them in Gaelic. Pinned beneath her knee, Ross gasped, "You?" The dockside tomboy with the letters. "Captain," she corrected, handcuffing him with the set Graham tossed over, and detective enough to know a charlatan when I smell peat smoke and cheap romance in equal measure. 9. Back at the shieling, the widows stood shoulder to shoulder, anger and relief braided together. Ross was read his rights: attempted fraud, obtaining money by deception, impersonation of deceased persons, and whatever else the fiscal procurator chose to heap on. Ross turned bleary eyes toward the women. "I intended no harm. Only to liberate you from mourning, offer companionship. Morag cut him dead. Aye, with our heirlooms as dowry." Elspeth edged closer, voice low, careful. "The cruelest theft is hope, Mr. Ross." Aine added, "You wrote forever yours. Too bad you'll be the Crown's property instead." After the police carted him off, Fiona walked the widows down to the inlet where the Hebridean post rocked softly against its mooring lines. The sky cleared, revealing Ben Nevis in distant sunlight. They were quiet, the 3 of them, having ridden out both storm and calm in the same afternoon. Fiona expected chastened silence, but Morag broke it with a wry laugh. "We've let a scoundrel bring us together. Might as well make something good of it. Castle Drummond's kitchens are fit for a gathering, are they not, Elspeth?" Lady Drummond considered, then smiled. "Champagne can drown disappointment, as well as celebrate justice." Aline lifted her son into the cockpit, looking 10 years younger for having shed the weight of illusion. "And perhaps we form a society, Widows Against Rogues. You can be honorary chairman, Captain." Fiona chuckled, easing the boat into open water. Gulls whirled overhead, shouting approval or criticism, nobody knew which. 10. Rain peppered the deck come evening, but inside the wheelhouse a coal stove glowed red. Fiona opened the day's new mail. Shipping invoices, a postcard from her sister, and one small envelope addressed in her own handwriting. She'd posted it to herself months ago, an exercise a grief counsellor had suggested. Write your future self a promise and mail it on the day you're ready to keep it. She slit it open. "You will find a reason to believe your old skills still serve the world. When that happens, don't hide from it." She smiled, folded the note and slipped it beneath the ship's compass. Outside, dusk painted the Loch indigo, and the Hebridean post ploughed through it with purpose. By morning, the story would travel every croft and castle, how 3 widows linked by grief refused to be bound by deception, how a mailboat captain solved a mystery where love letters turned out to be counterfeit, and how, on a quiet Highlands run, justice arrived not in sirens, but on the patient thrum of a ferry engine. Fiona eased the throttle, feeling the boat's timbers answer with contented creaks. The Highlands still held dark corners and riddles, but tonight her small vessel cut a true line through them, carrying letters that were only what they claimed to be. And in that honest wake, she found a measure of peace she hadn't known she'd been missing. Peace sturdy enough to weather whatever puzzle tomorrow's tide washed aboard.